My sister declared rents tripling to $5,900 or get out by morning, even as my son lay in the ICU. I didn't argue, just handed her a black envelope. When she opened it, she went pale. Because I owned the building. I'm Odellis. My sister looked me dead in the eye and said, "Your rent's tripling to $5,900, or get out by morning." She knew my son was in the ICU. She didn't flinch. No mercy. No grace. But I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just handed her a black envelope. And when she opened it, her face went pale, like she'd just seen a ghost. Because I wasn't just her tenant, I was the owner of the entire building. But what broke me wasn't just the rent. It was the years I let them treat me like I didn't belong in my own bloodline. How did it get this far? And what exactly was inside that envelope? This isn't just a story about property. It's about something stolen, then silently reclaimed. Before we dive in, what time are you listening to this and where from? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know who's hearing this story. By the time I got back to the apartment, my legs felt like they didn't belong to me anymore. 13 hours at the hospital, most of it spent in a stiff vinyl chair beside Malik's bed, watching monitors beep, while nurses whispered updates I could barely absorb. The cold air bit through my coat as I climbed the 3 narrow flights of stairs to my unit, the building's hallway still dim, still drafty, same as always. Then I saw it. A bright pink sheet of paper crookedly taped to my front door. My keys stalled in my hand. The paper flapped a little at the edges from the hallway draft. I pulled it off carefully, my breath fogging the air. The first line hit like a slap. Effective immediately. Rent is increasing from $11,900 to $5,900. Pay or vacate by 10 a.m. tomorrow. No greeting. No explanation. No warning. Signed at the bottom, Seraphin Nash, Managing Partner, Nash Properties LLC. My own sister. For a few seconds, I just stood there trying to decide if this was some kind of twisted joke, but the embossed letterhead told me it wasn't. It was the real deal. I unlocked the door and walked inside. The apartment was cold. I hadn't turned the heat on since I'd spent the last few nights at the hospital, sleeping in the family waiting room. I dropped my bag by the door and sat down on the worn-out couch, still holding the notice in my hands. Seraphin didn't call, didn't text, just slapped this on my door like I was a stranger. It wasn't always like this. 8 years ago, I moved back here when Dad started getting sick. I gave up a promotion in Chicago, moved into this very apartment, Unit 3B, to help out. Back then, Seraphin swore we'd settle the inheritance later. Said everything was being held in trust until the estate was finalized. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. She was my big sister. But months passed after Dad died, then years. No final will. No lawyer. Just Seraphin taking over piece by piece. At some point, she stopped calling me her sister and started calling me the tenant. I pulled out my phone and tried calling her. It rang once then kicked straight to voicemail. I hesitated before speaking. "Hey, Seraphin. I just got the notice. Malik is still in ICU and I really can't deal with moving right now. Can we talk?" I sent her a follow-up message, short and pleading. 30 minutes passed, then an hour. Her reply came after midnight. "This isn't personal. Business is business. You've had below market rent for long enough." I stared at the screen. No concern for Malik. No question about how we were holding up. Just those flat-clipped words. Business is business. Right. The radiator hissed in the corner, trying and failing to warm the room. I went to the kitchenette, found a packet of tea, and stood there waiting for the water to boil when I heard a soft knock on the door. I hesitated, then opened it. "Odellis, honey," came a familiar voice. It was Mrs. Bellman from 2A, widow, always smelled faintly of lavender and menthol rub. She held out a container. "Thought you could use something warm." I thanked her, voice catching a little. She looked at the paper still clenched in my hand. "She left one on my door too last fall. My rent went up overnight. Told me I could find other accommodations if I didn't like it." I didn't know what to say. Mrs. Bellman patted my arm gently. "You don't deserve this, and neither does that boy of yours. She's cold, that one. Cold like a fish." I gave her a tired smile. "Thanks for the soup." When the door clicked shut, the silence returned. Thicker somehow. By 3 a.m., I was back at the hospital seated by Malik's bed again. He was still under. The machines kept doing their thing. Blinking, pulsing, keeping time like a slow mechanical metronome. I reached into my bag, pulled out my laptop. The hospital Wi-Fi was sluggish, but it was enough. I logged into my email, found the old PDF I'd nearly forgotten about. Deed transfer, Unit 3B, Nash Building. It had my name on it, Odellis Nash, sole owner. Dated 2 weeks before Dad went into surgery. Notarized, filed, quietly finalized. I blinked at the screen. The document had always been there. I'd saved it out of grief, maybe out of some misplaced sentiment, but I never shared it with anyone, not even Seraphin. She didn't know. No one did. I looked at the name again, printed in thick legal font. Mine, not hers. Not Nash Properties LLC. I closed the laptop slowly and reached into my purse for a black envelope. It was stiff, heavy, the seal still intact. I'd kept it for emergencies. I'd hoped never to open it, but that pink slip changed everything. My fingers curled around it. I didn't want to use this, I whispered under my breath, eyes never leaving Malik's face, but she left me no choice. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, like it knew what it carried. I slipped it back into my bag, zipped the leather closed, and stood. A nurse in blue scrubs nodded gently as she passed, wheeling a tray of untouched breakfast down the hallway. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, but the real was inside me. Not fear, not quite rage either. It was that still crackling place between survival and silence where something hard begins to wake up. I leaned in over Malik's bed before I left the ICU. He was asleep, curled slightly to his right, a wire running from the monitor to his chest. His lips moved a little as if he were dreaming of running again, or maybe just breathing easy. I'll be back before lunch, baby, I whispered, brushing a curl from his temple. Mama's got something to handle. It was 9:07 when I stepped outside. Newark's winter air hit like a slap, cold, sharp, honest. I walked straight past the parking meter I hadn't fed since last night. Let him ticket me. I wasn't in the mood to be scared of small things anymore. By 10:02, I was stepping into the glass lobby of the Channing building. Marble floors, some soft piano music overhead, the kind that tried too hard not to be noticed, and a receptionist who looked barely old enough to remember dial-up internet. She glanced up, didn't smile. Name? Odalis Nash. She typed something, frowned. Do you have an appointment? No. She looked up, lips pursed. Then I'm afraid I'm her sister, I said plainly. That made her blink. Then without bothering to hide her doubt, she picked up the phone and murmured something I couldn't hear. I didn't wait. I walked past the desk. That's when a young man with slick hair, a sharp navy blazer, and a smug face stepped into my path like he'd been rehearsing the move all morning. Miss Nash? His voice tilted upward like I was a name he was trying to remember from a file he didn't want to open. Yes, I'm Gregory, Seraphine's assistant. All meetings are by appointment only. I'm her sister. He gave a dry, almost pitying chuckle. Not in this office, you're not. There it was. That line. Like I was just some woman showing up at the wrong window at the DMV, not someone who had changed Seraphine's diapers, cleaned our father's 4 tubes, or held her hand when her credit tanked and she cried in the driveway like the world owed her everything. I looked past him, toward the thick glass door marked Executive Suite, S. Nash. Tell her I'm here, or I'll tell security what's buried in the basement filing cabinet under D for deed. His jaw tightened. 5 minutes later he returned with a stiff nod. I walked into the office like I belonged there. She was seated behind a desk large enough to land a drone on. The room smelled like peppermint and paper. A green drink rested beside her MacBook, probably her usual matcha with oat milk. She didn't stand, didn't even blink. Well, she said, tapping a key without looking up, you made it before noon. Her voice had changed, too level, too neat. I didn't come to talk about the weather. You never do, she muttered, and finally looked at me. Her eyes scanned my coat, my jeans, the tired on my face like she was appraising the damage. I sat across from her. She didn't offer me water, didn't ask about Malik. You got my notice? I did. She folded her hands over the desk. The market's changed odorless. You either pay the updated rate or you vacate. That's how this works. You know that. I know a lot of things. Then you know it's not personal. She said, lips curling just slightly. It's business. Always has been. I reached into my bag, pulled out the black envelope, laid it on her desk like a quiet bomb. Before you throw around more legal phrases, you might want to read this. She hesitated. That was new. Then she slid the document out, her eyes moving fast, left to right, again, slower. Her hand twitched slightly at the bottom where the notary seal caught the light. This is, she began. It's the deed, fully notarized, dated 2 months before Dad passed. I'm the legal owner, not partial, not pending. Full. I let the silence work. She set the papers down carefully. You're bluffing. You know I'm not. Her tone hardened. I've been managing that property under my LLC for 6 years. You can't just walk in now and pretend. I'm not pretending. I reached into my coat and pulled out the second document, thick, stapled, dated. These are the filings you made under Seraphine Nash Holdings LLC. You never informed me, not once, and you filed them under a beneficiary trust you didn't have legal right to access. She stared. Her nails tapped the desk once, then again, her cool cracked just a little. I handled the taxes, the maintenance, the repairs. You also raised rents on elderly tenants without notice, including Mrs. Bellman downstairs who's living on a pension. Her voice tightened. She pays late every month. And you still gave her a 60-day notice in winter? I said. You raised her rent by 30% without heat upgrades. You raised mine by triple, while my son's fighting to stay alive. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. I warned you years ago, Odellis. You always think with your heart. That's why you're stuck in places like this. That's why you'll always be small. It hit. She knew it would, but this time I didn't flinch. I stood slowly, gathered the documents back into my bag. You didn't just evict me, I said, my voice steady. You tried to evict your nephew while he was hooked to a ventilator. She didn't respond. I turned and walked out. No yelling, no parting shot, just the quiet kind of exit that feels final. I stepped back into the hallway, past the receptionist toward the elevator. Just before the door slid closed, I heard hurried footsteps. Gregory. He slipped in beside me, panting slightly. Miss Nash, wait, off the record. How long have you known about the deed? I looked at him. For the first time I really looked. His tie was slightly askew now, and he smelled faintly of panic. Long enough, I said, and let the faintest smile reach my lips to know I don't owe her anything anymore. Gregory didn't say another word. He stood frozen outside the revolving doors, still holding the elevator button like he couldn't decide whether to chase after me or disappear into his little clipboard world. I didn't wait to find out. I stepped out into the chill of Newark air, let the glass doors shut behind me, and walked the 3 blocks back to my building without even checking the time. 2 days passed. I didn't do anything loud. I didn't scream or warn or send a single warning email, but I did sleep with the envelope beside my bed, and I did file one thing, an anonymous request for an inspection, not just about my own unit, about the entire property, because this wasn't just about me anymore, not after what Seraphine tried to do to Malik. By the second morning, I was up before the sun, sorting Malik's hospital discharge papers on the kitchen table. The light in the living room was still off, and the radiator clanked like it always did in winter. More noise than heat. I was rereading the allergy section in his prescription list when a knock came at the door. 3 short taps. Firm. Deliberate. I opened it to find 2 people in dark city-issued jackets. One older man with tired eyes. One woman with a no-nonsense clipboard. Miss Nash? The man asked. Yes? We're from Newark Housing and Urban Affairs, responding to a code enforcement request. Mind if we come in? I nodded once. No dramatics. Just opened the door wider and stepped aside. They introduced themselves, Mr. Eldridge and Miss Carr, and then wasted no time. The woman lifted her tablet. The man glanced at the baseboards like he already knew where the problems were. We'll start with the common areas. Then your unit, Miss Carr said. Is there access to the basement? There is, I replied, but you might want a mask. It smells like wet cardboard down there on good days. They exchanged a quick glance, and I could tell this wasn't their first time dealing with this kind of landlord or this kind of mold. By the time they finished the hallway and stairwell audit, rusted hinges, missing rail bolts, loose lighting fixtures, I'd brewed a pot of coffee. They didn't take any, just kept moving room to room, methodical and quiet. At one point I stood near the window, watching my neighbor's curtain twitch across the hall. A few doors cracked open. A man from 4B peered out with his oxygen tank in tow. From somewhere down the corridor, a whisper floated over. You finally did it, didn't you? It was Mrs. Bellman from 3A. She looked older than I remembered, paler. I didn't say much, just met her eyes and gave a small nod. It's time the truth got some air, I said. Mr. Eldridge returned upstairs just as she shut her door. We'll need photos of the boiler room and sprinkler lines too. This place hasn't seen a full review in years. I followed them downstairs again through the warped wooden door that barely latched. The hallway lights flickered as we stepped into the basement. One bulb hummed loudly, the kind that makes you feel like something's about to explode. Black patches traced the wall above the water heater. Mr. Eldridge pulled out a penlight and muttered, this isn't just age, this is neglect. He didn't say Serafini's name. He didn't have to. By 9 a.m., they'd filled 3 pages of violation notes, all photographed and time-stamped. They were documenting everything. I answered when asked. I didn't embellish. I didn't accuse, but my silence was loud enough. The last straw for me? It wasn't even the rent. It was watching my boy struggle to breathe in an ER while my sister emailed a revised lease with a market adjustment clause. $5,900 for mold and roaches and flickering heat. Upstairs again, Ms. Carr tapped her tablet and said, we'll be recommending partial shutdown of the east stairwell. It's not structurally sound. I nodded. There's also something off about the boiler pressure. She raised a brow. Noted. I turned toward the lobby just as I heard it. The sharp click of heels against linoleum. Quick. Furious. And then Serafini's voice rang out like a blade. What the hell is going on here? She marched in wearing her power coat and pointed shoes like she owned the building. even though the papers in my desk drawer said otherwise. Mr. Eldridge didn't flinch. "Ma'am, we're conducting a compliance inspection. The property was flagged for review by the listed owner." Seraphin spun, eyes narrowing. "You filed this?" She barked at me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move. "I authorized it," I said plainly. She blinked hard, like she couldn't believe the words came from me. "You've lost your damn mind," she hissed. "After everything I've managed, everything I've carried, this is how you thank me? Filing complaints like some stranger off the street?" I kept my arms at my sides. "You raised a sick child's rent to $5,900 and called it just business," I said. "So I'm doing business too, just the kind that follows the law." Her lips curled like she tasted something bitter. "You always did have a problem staying in your place." Mr. Eldridge cleared his throat politely, trying not to get pulled into it. Seraphine whipped around and pointed a perfectly manicured nail toward the door. "You'll regret this, Odalis. I swear on everything." She didn't finish. Her voice cracked, and then she spun around stomping out before she could lose any more ground in front of witnesses. The hallway was silent. Ms. Carr turned to me and said quietly, "We're going to need to shut down the east stairwell until repairs are made." I nodded. "And," I added, "you should schedule the fire marshal for a full audit of the boiler room." I don't trust a single thing she had touched. The inspector stared at me a beat. "You're not playing around, are you?" I exhaled. Not shakily, just steady. Tired, but steady. "Not anymore." I stood by the stairwell a second longer, letting those words settle in my bones like bricks finally finding place in a foundation. Then I turned and walked back toward my apartment, one steady step at a time. I didn't look over my shoulder. Seraphine had gotten too used to people flinching when she snapped. That wouldn't be me anymore. By the time I reached my door, the hallway had fallen quiet again, save for a soft thump of footsteps coming from upstairs and the faint creak of the elevator cables shifting. Life in the building was returning to its usual, but under it now ran something new, an undercurrent of awareness. Folks knew the silence had been broken. Back inside, I slipped off my shoes and went straight to the kitchen, pouring a glass of water I didn't drink. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a low ache in my spine and a heaviness behind my eyes. But just as I sat down, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. "Janine. Nurse line." I stood up fast, knocking the edge of the table with my knee. "Hello, Odalis?" "He's stable. Breathing easier today. I think, if all goes well tonight, you might be able to bring Malik home tomorrow." I gripped the counter with my free hand. "Are you serious?" "I wouldn't say it if I wasn't. Just wanted you to hear it before shift change." The call ended. I stayed frozen in place for a breath, then picked up Malik's little stuffed lion from the windowsill. The seams were worn near the paws where he used to rub it in his sleep. I pressed it against my chest. We were almost there. By 4, I was at the hospital. I'd grabbed the lion and a bag of clean pajamas from Malik. His cheeks had color again. Not much, but enough to let my shoulders relax. "Mom," he whispered, his voice scratchy. "Did you bring him?" I pulled out the lion. "Right here." He smiled. "The real kind. The one that curved slowly and stayed." "I want to go home." "Soon," I said, brushing his hair back. "We're getting closer." I sat there for maybe 20 minutes, humming softly while he drifted. For the first time in what felt like years, I allowed myself to believe, really believe, that we might come out of this intact. Then my phone buzzed. "Gregory, FYI, Seraphine's not taking this quietly." I didn't even have time to reply before someone knocked on the room door. A man in a delivery jacket stood there holding an envelope the width of a brick. "Are you Miss Odalis Nash?" "Yes. You've been served." I signed, took it, and stepped into the hallway before opening it. "Civil complaint, Superior Court of Essex County. Plaintiff, Seraphine Nash, alleging fraudulent transfer of deed, illegal occupancy, and immediate request for injunction on all property income." She was trying to freeze everything. Every dollar that paid for Malik's care, the utility bills, even emergency repairs, the gall. Back in the room, Malik stirred. "Mom?" I slipped the envelope into my purse. "Just paperwork, baby. Nothing you need to worry about." He blinked slowly, trusting me. I smiled, kissed his forehead, and then excused myself to the hallway. As soon as the door closed behind me, I gripped the wall and let the tears fall, but only for 1 minute. 1. I counted. Then I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and started calling people. My old paralegal friend from community college, a tenant rights attorney I'd met last year at a Newark forum, a guy Gregory once mentioned who specialized in housing disputes. I wasn't waiting for Seraphine's fire to burn through everything. I was building a firewall. The next morning, I was outside Newark Civil Court by 8:15. Blazer pressed and documents neatly filed in a manila folder. I didn't have a fancy legal team, but I had facts, and I knew how to read fine print. Inside, The clerk glanced at my ID and paused. "Oh," she said, eyebrows lifting. "You're that Nash." I nodded, unsurprised. Serafini had likely painted me as some unhinged squatter trying to steal the family legacy, but I didn't flinch. "I'm here to file a countersuit." The woman blinked. "You're countersuing her?" "For fraudulent mismanagement of shared family property," I said. "Neglect of tenant welfare, illegal rent hikes on protected residents, and breach of fiduciary duty." I handed over copies of building inspection reports, financial statements with glaring irregularities, and most damning email printouts from Seraphine herself bragging about draining the old girl dry before city eyes catch on. The clerk glanced at the stack. "We'll log this today. Look, the mint's growing faster than the basil. Yeah, maybe it's racing to impress us." He laughed, a full belly deep sound I hadn't heard in months, the kind that bounces off bricks and lifts up everything it touches. "Mommy," he said, settling next to me. "This is ours, right? All of it?" I looked out at the roof, at the sky, at the place that had once caged me. It didn't anymore. "All of it, sweetheart. Not just the building. The piece, too." He nodded like he already knew, then held out a slightly squashed cupcake. "I saved the pink one for you." We sat there on that rooftop, legs swinging, our cheeks sticky with frosting, the city humming soft beneath us. Sunset melted over the skyline like gold ink across gray paper. And for once, nothing needed to be said. They tried to raise the rent on my silence. Evict my worth. They used the word family like a leash. But peace doesn't ask for permission. It just begins where the noise ends. And in that silence, I remembered something they forgot. I never needed a key. I was always the owner.